The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, March 22nd, 2017 is now called to order. Mr. Paulson, would you call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Badami?
Here.
Commissioner Hudis?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
And Vice Chair Kane.
Here. I'd ask everyone to stand and join Commissioner Janoff in Pledge Allegiance.
Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Town of Los Gatos strongly encourages active participation in the public process, which is a cornerstone of democracy and essential to the Planning Commission conducting its business on behalf of the Town Council and citizens of the town. There are several ways for the public to participate in the deliberations of the Planning Commission. Written comments about agenda items submitted to the staff prior to a meeting are always welcome and helpful. At the meetings of the Commission, there are two opportunities for members of the public to participate. One is during verbal communications, where an individual may speak on any topic not on the agenda, and any member of the public may speak during the public hearing of an item that is on the agenda. If you wish to address the Commission tonight during the verbal communication period or during the consideration of an agenda item, please complete a speaker card located on the back of the benches where you are seated. Turn the card into a staff member, and please print your name carefully, clearly. For anyone who does intend to speak this evening, I would ask that you come up to the podium, adjust the microphone so that you are speaking directly into it, and if you leave the podium, take the microphone with you. Not when you're done, but while you're still speaking. Please state your name and address for the record, and in fairness to all who want to speak at this meeting, it is requested that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, members of the Commission serve on several town committees. Are there any committee reports tonight? Commissioner Hudis.
The Historic Preservation Committee met earlier today, and we considered 3 items. 125 Tate Avenue, which was recommended approval with minor modifications to architectural details. 16707 Shannon Avenue, which we recommended that was a little complicated, but that the front porch could be demolished in order to proceed with a building permit. And the third item was to give input on 231 University Avenue, where we gave direction that the structure was historic and expect to see certain design elements if they come back for a rebuild of the property.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, I'll move to commission matters. Are there any matters that any commissioner wishes to bring forth? Seeing none, I'll move to verbal communications. The verbal communications portion of our meeting, members are invited to address the commission on any issue not on the agenda. Remember, there's a 3-minute time limit. I'll need a card if anyone wishes to speak. Mr. Fellini, this is on a case matter?
I think so. It's on the proposed development at Forest.
Okay, thank you.
That's for both verbal communications and
I'm going to try. Gencro Meza Roa? Did I get that? Hanaro. State your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Hanaro Mezaroa. I live on 218 Avery Lane. If Los Gatos were a painting, then the surrounding mountains would surely be its frame. And although the painting itself contains the essence of the artwork, the frame provides the context. In the same manner, the mountains provide the aesthetic backdrop of daily life in our town. The mountainous skyline, sublime and majestic, is a source of inspiration and pride for all of those who inhabit this gorgeous town. However, the ability to enjoy our beautiful frame is currently threatened by development proposals that reach high in the sky and block the view of the mountains. Los Gatos is not a town for tall buildings. It is not a town that should try to compete with other cities for available retail and office space. Los Gatos is a town that needs to protect one of its most valuable assets, the sheer beauty of our environment. To develop buildings that block the view of the mountains is to disinvest in what makes this town so valuable. It is for this reason that I vehemently oppose to any more two-story developments in the central area of Los Gatos. I urge the Commission to remember what makes this town beautiful and to reject any such developments. In addition to preserving our skyline, I believe the town should respect its areas that are historic, even if they do not have an official designation as such. There are very few traditional and, dare I say, humble residences left in Los Gatos. In my mind, they are jewels of a bygone era that connect us to our past and provide a much-needed relief from the ostentatiousness that pervades our residential infrastructure. We need to respect our historical heritage and preserve such properties. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have any other cards? I'll move to the consent calendar. The consent calendar contains items to be handled with a single motion. Before the Planning Commission acts on the consent calendar, any member of the public or the Commission may request an item be removed from the consent calendar. At the Chair's discretion, items removed may be considered either before or after the public hearing portion of the agenda. Tonight's consent calendar consists of, and we'll do this with one motion, consists of approval of the minutes of March 8th, concerns the application on 401 and 409 Alberta Way, A&S application S15056. The third item is 15860, 15880, and 15894 Winchester Boulevard, A&S application S16023. And I'm going to add a fourth item, 360 Bella Vista Avenue, A&S application S15053, because the applicant has asked for a continuance to
We would be continuing it to a date certain of April 12th.
April 12th. Any items to be pulled by anybody? Then look for a motion. Commissioner Padami.
I move to approve consent items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I have a second. Commissioner Birch.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Moving on to the public hearings. Tonight we have one item, item number 4 on our agenda. It's item number 5 on our agenda. It's 30 Roberts Road and 6 Forest Avenue. This is A&S application S16070, subdivision application M16009. We have a staff report tonight from our new planner, Mr. Hill.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. The project in front of you tonight is the proposal from the applicant, Gary King, requesting approval to demolish an existing multifamily dwelling and one existing single-family dwelling and to construct a new 19,080 square foot multifamily dwelling at 30 Roberts Road and 6 Forest Avenue. Additionally, the applicant is requesting approval of a parcel merger to accommodate the proposed density at the project site. The proposed 3-story multifamily dwelling would consist of 4 attached units ranging from 2,727 square feet to 3,159 square feet and would have a maximum height of 35 feet. The project proposes 11 on-site parking spaces within a 3,949 square foot underground garage. The project is being considered by the Planning Commission this evening, as any request for a new multifamily development requires your review and approval. The town's consulting architect reviewed the plans reviewed the plans and commented that the proposed design seems out of character with the adjacent smaller scale neighborhood. The consulting architect raised 8 concerns and made 5 recommendations for the project. The applicant has chosen not to incorporate the recommendations into the project design. The consulting architect's report has been provided in Exhibit 6, and the applicant's response can be found in Exhibit 9. Public comments regarding the request were submitted to staff and have been included in Exhibit 11. Staff recommends denial of the application based on the massing of the building, which does not conform to the goals and policies of the general plan in terms of neighborhood compatibility. This completes staff's presentation. However, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Before the questions, let me seek disclosures. Have all the commissioners had an opportunity to visit the site? Any disclosures on those visits or any other matter? Thank you. Questions for staff? Commissioner Hudis.
I understand that applicants requesting demolition. Are the structures pre-1941, and was there any reason that they would have needed to go to the Historic Preservation Committee?
The records available that we have shows that the residence at 6 Forest was constructed in 1949, and that would be the oldest of the 2 structures.
And therefore, HPC review is not required.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner?
Just a quick question. We received a desk item earlier today, and there was a suggestion that the development plans might have changed from the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee to now, and I was wondering if staff could address whether that was the case or not.
There were some changes that were made in that desk item. Most of those, I believe all those comments were correct. That was conceptual design that was reviewed at the CDAC meeting. So there were some revisions that were made since that meeting.
But clearly, I would imagine that what we have in our packet is what we need to consider tonight.
That's correct.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Other questions? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing and...
Actually, Chair, really quickly, before the end of the meeting, in case anyone leaves, a car key was found in the ladies' restroom earlier. So if you're missing a car key, you can come up to us after the meeting.
Is that the Porsche car key? I think that's mine. Who's our lead speaker? Do we know? Tom? Mr. Sloan, will you be speaking for the application? You will have 10 minutes to address the commission, followed by public speakers, after which you will have 5 minutes to make your closing remarks. Just go back and forth this way. That's great. Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tom Sloan. I'm the project's architect, and I'll begin here. How did we get here? Well, our goal was to simply design a new prototype for residential projects with the marvelous feature that would induce my high-end clients away from building in our hillsides. The idea was to preserve the town's beauty and its resources by developing upper-end living in the center of town where supplies, services, and amenities are close by, walkable and bikeable. The home would be compact yet expansive inside, fitting on a very smaller lot than it would take if we were building in the hills. Each of the units is 100% accessible, allowing aging in place, perhaps having people move out of the hills and into this neighborhood. And it is constructed using green technologies and construction methods and also green products. So the site is located on the corner of Forest and Roberts Road. It is located on the corner of the RM 212 zoning district, allowing for a variety of residential uses and densities up to 12 units per acre. Over to the eastern border, the area was zoned for office use with a contiguous properties being rezoned office PD to allow a residential plan development. And across the street, the areas the area's zoning allows for a variety of residential uses and density up to 20 units per acre. The neighborhood, Roberts Road, includes an unbelievable mixture of 6 different zoning districts just on this little stretch of Roberts Road. And that's 6 different building typologies that I've been able to find. Roberts Road is truly unique. It's like a town within a town. I'm hoping yeah, there we go. Cottages such as these, really venerate the past, a time when there was no housing element. These were created, let alone a general plan that was adopted in 1963. But today, the town's planning codes are multifaceted and in many cases necessitate very challenging interpretations. Language such as preserve and enhance the existing character and sense of place in residential neighborhoods can be interpreted in really many different ways, especially for this project and in this neighborhood. Depending on one's personal normalcy bias, a project or a person could project their feelings on our project and say, it needs to look like my house or my little cottage, inferring that a particular building does not fit into the neighborhood because it does not have the character of a smaller scaled residence, when in fact this neighborhood is comprised of an eclectic range of properties. Here we have a 3-story structure, despite the remark from the staff saying that the proposed massing of the 3-story multi-family building is larger than any of the buildings in the immediate neighborhood. This is just 2 doors down. There are several 3-story residential projects in the immediate neighborhood. This happens to be one, and it actually sits right next to one of those small cottages that I just showed you earlier. Here we have another 3-story residence on Roberts Road. It's a little bit closer to our site, but across the street. I thought I would include this 3-story, and some people call it 4 and 5 stories, multiple family residence as one that was recently constructed in the neighborhood, a much larger scale and contemporary in style. Sorry about that. I'll assume that these buildings and those 3 buildings I showed you are evocative of the many policies that state things like to preserve and enhance the existing character and sense of place in residential neighborhoods, and as well as this was one of the things that staff said, our building didn't have, or to encourage a variety of housing types and sizes that is balanced throughout the town and within the neighborhoods, and that is also complementary in character to the surrounding neighborhoods. Here's our building. I labeled it 2-story facade because the majority of what you're seeing is 2 stories because we really set the upper story back. It is not really clear to me whether the Canon Design Group, when they presented their review of our project, it was done under the guise of the Residential Design Guidelines, which is actually a document that does not govern multifamily buildings. It governs single-family neighborhoods and the like. But that said, our goal was to create a project that was actually historic, not in a contrived way, but one that does not emulate older homes, but one that marks its own place in time, its own place in history, today's time. As illustrated in the perspective dwelling, the 3rd story is 25 feet back from the lower face of the building. This was done to better transition this project into its surroundings. Here you see cars that are out, or you don't see cars, they're out of view, and the sidewalk will be extended, which it isn't there now, to promote a more friendly neighborhood. Here on this cross-section, it illustrates how the 2nd floor mitigates the overall height impact of the 3rd story by setting it back. It shows how the cars are hidden from view. We're integrating solar panels on the roof. These solar panels are completely hidden from view and will generate abundance of clean, green energy. The older unhealthy trees will be replaced with an abundance of visual mitigation impact trees. And finally, one of the features that that we showed the Planning Commission at the CDAC hearing that they really liked was, that we had these nice elevators. So with the remaining amount of time that I have, this gentleman is the owner of Living Homes, and I'd like to give him a little bit of time, 2.5 minutes.
Great. Yeah, I just want to quickly, we're going to work with the...
I'm sorry, is it Mr.
Oh,
Glenn?
Yes.
Give us your name and address, please.
Sorry, did you say address too?
Yeah.
Steve Glenn, 2914 Highland Avenue, Santa Monica.
Thank you.
So I run Living Homes and plant prefab, and we're working with the applicant on this project. I just want to briefly mention we're pretty well known for the sustainable work we've done. So our first home in the corner was the first home ever to be certified LEED Platinum. We built the first LEED Platinum multifamily in Northern California. That was in San Francisco. The first LEED Platinum multifamily in Los Altos, which was Silicon Valley. First LEED Platinum in Newport Beach. We've done 24 LEED Platinum homes, more than almost any other design firm in the world. We won the AIA's Top Design Award. We also plan to prefabricate the building, and that's pretty important for the community because it means we'll be able to construct in half the time and with far less neighborhood disruption. So instead of 6-9 months of 12 months of trucks, construction workers, materials, staging areas, it'll be built off-site in a factory that pays living wages, that employs no toxic materials, only sustainable resources. It will be then brought on site, so we save lots and lots, months and months of neighborhood disruption, dramatic reduction of waste, and overall, as I mentioned, far less construction time. I'll just mention briefly, our goal with the projects we do is as much as possible to do zero energy, to reclaim the water we need for irrigation. Every project we've ever built has a gray water system integrated. We use materials that do not off-gas. We are extremely concerned about waste. So this shows you some of the prefabrication. Thank you.
You have time. That's a 30-second bell.
Okay. So this just shows you how we build in modules and how they're craned in place. Typically in one day, a project like this might take 2 days. So again, we save an incredible amount of neighborhood disruption because of that. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? Commissioner Badami.
Most of the examples that you just provided us on the overhead, they're apartment buildings. And so with apartment buildings, usually the intensity or square footage of each unit, I would imagine, would not exceed 1,000 square feet. So we're looking at units that are maybe about 3,000 square feet for neighborhood compatibility with the examples that you just gave us.
Yeah, up to and a little bit less than, I think around 2,800 to 3,000 square feet. The reason why we did that, again, was we're trying to lure we're trying to lure people that normally, my clients go out and they go up into the hills and they disrupt the hills. We're trying to give them a product that they would like to live in down here closer into town.
Okay, so that being said, we still need to look for neighborhood compatibility. And I'm looking at Exhibit 9, where you've responded to the town architect, and you state that the project follows the general plan regarding neighborhood compatibility. So can you elaborate on that? Because I didn't quite see that in the examples that you provided.
Well, I know I had to speed through it pretty quick. This neighborhood is not a typical neighborhood, and I think the general plan is sort of an overarching plan with the goals, right? It's not, we don't really discuss specific zoning requirements and all that. So compatibility in a neighborhood that has six different zoning designations is truly unique. And what I tried to show you was, I think a lot of people the neighbors that we met were very concerned about the compatibility to their particular homes. It wasn't people that were living in the apartments in the larger buildings. So, I consider this as I thought, I showed you that picture of the two-story street facade. You can't see windows. You can see some roof overhangs, which are larger than normal. But from the street, you'll look up and you're not going to see the third story. You don't want to see the third story walls unless, you position yourself just at the right exact place, which, is going to be difficult to do.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudas.
I had a few questions about architectural style.
Yes.
Could you please describe the architectural style of the proposal?
Well, it's simply contemporary. It's derived its form from first of all, we originally had a butterfly shaped roof to collect the rainwater, and which is it was a gently sloped butterfly roof, meaning the gable doesn't gable up as a ridge, it folds inward. And that was to hide the solar panels. We then just went to a flat roof for that purpose.
Okay, so contemporary.
Contemporary.
That probably applies to 100 years or 75 years worth of architecture.
Well, contemporary
the
means of
1950s.
today. Modern architecture is emulated, but modern really marks a time, probably in the 20s and 30s, maybe through the 40s.
So could you go into any more detail about this style? It looks very orthogonal to me. It looks like it is, a lot of right angles. And could you maybe describe this particular style other than just contemporary?
I'll tell you, it's not deriving itself from historical styles. There's from Europe or from other countries. It's contemporary.
Yeah, I could ask
I really can't. Okay. And the right angles. I think most buildings are right angles unless they're curvilinear. Are you talking about the roof form being not pitched?
Well, that's one element.
Yeah.
What I'm also looking for is some kind of a description that I can use to have a finding that this is compatible with other architecture, and I haven't yet heard that.
Okay,
If
okay,
there is
that's different.
another residential example, of similar size, similar character that I could understand, that would be helpful.
Well, being sort of revolutionary, I said that this was more or less a prototype. This project didn't draw its inspiration at all from the neighborhood. However, in terms of mass and bulk and some of the large, let's go to, if I can go backwards a little bit here. So it's very well articulated. It has a lot of outdoor spaces. This is, I didn't try to make it look like another building. I just simply tried to design nice interior spaces. It has a lot of articulation. The third story is is not there.
Maybe I could just ask one more question in terms of the architectural style. Is there anything that suggests residential in this particular draft that you've submitted? what elements of the architecture would suggest that this is a residence as compared to an office building?
I'm sorry. I think what you're getting at is because it doesn't look like a house, therefore it isn't. I'm not. I don't understand your question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Birch.
If Commissioner Janoff was going to also discuss the architectural style, as she has done a lot of review in those neighborhoods, I'll hold my questions because they're on a different vein and defer to Commissioner Janoff at this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you, Commissioner Birch. It's interesting that Commissioner Hudis asked the very question was in my mind. This looks like an office building to me, and I happened to be on National the other day, and I was having a really hard time distinguishing between what's an office building and what's an apartment building. And when I looked at your architecture, the same thing struck me, but kind of the opposite way around. And in terms of justifying how a residential structure that's a multifamily structure that looks like an office building and is sized height-wise as an office building, how that works with neighborhood compatibility is a question that I have. So if you could elaborate a little bit on how this particular style speaks residential and is neighborhood compatible in a residential neighborhood, I would appreciate that.
Again, I looked at compatibility not from a style standpoint. I looked at compatibility from a mass and scale standpoint. And we could say that this has a lot of private outdoor spaces that are integrated into the facade that normally wouldn't be there if it was an office building. An office building doesn't have these large fenestrations that are deeply recessed. It has pretty much a straight wall like the library next door here. Contemporary, sometimes called modern buildings, are a whole different genre, and so I think what you have is like I mentioned, and a lot of people I know have sort of this normalcy bias that says, I can't see it, and whereas for me, I don't know. I see things differently. With all, I understand that.
Follow up.
I have clients. We have a project. Larry Cannon reviewed it. You'll be seeing it very shortly. He gave it 100% glowing. It's equal in style. Very, very similar, and it's in just up the street here on Alpine, and so you'll be able to see that here
Thank
very
you.
soon.
Did you have a follow-up question, Commissioner? Other questions? Commissioner Hanson.
I wanted to go back to the issue of the neighborhood compatibility. You just said a few minutes ago that you did not draw the inspiration from the neighborhood. So I understand,
architectural, sorry to interrupt, I meant the style of the architectural neighborhood.
Right. So, so the problem we have is, we have to evaluate this relative to our general plan. And I was just looking at it earlier today, it's in our staff packet, to provide for well-planned, careful growth that reflects the town's existing character and infrastructure. Existing, not something else out there, to preserve and enhance the existing character and sense of place in residential neighborhoods. The type, density, and intensity of new land use shall be consistent with that of the immediate neighborhood. And there's 8 or 10 more comments very similar to that, all drawn directly from our general plan. So I think what we're all wrestling with and is how to characterize this as fitting in with the neighborhood, when you simply said a few minutes ago that that you didn't draw your inspiration from the existing neighborhoods. So I like I said, I do understand, that you're trying to bring something new to Los Gatos, but we're struggling with how does this fit in with the neighborhood.
Yeah, so let me sort of clarify. The style of the building, there is no other contemporary architecture except for the apartment building that I showed you, the large project that was recently submitted that has a contemporary look to it. But I don't happen to like that building. It's pretty boxy, and I wanted to do something that had a tremendous amount of relief and shadow lines, and didn't have a 3-story appearance from the street. But it doesn't have a peaked roof, and that's, I think that's maybe what everybody wants is something that has this something that looks familiar, that's something that's been done before.
Well,
And I kind of see, designing in a historic neighborhood as not creating Disneyland and copying right out of history, but inventing our own place in history, so that years from now somebody can look back and say, "Wow, that must have been done in 2017."
Thank you for your comments. One follow-up. We don't see a lot of applications where the consulting architect has made as many recommendations to change things. He gave you a very specific example of what he thought it might look like, which isn't actually exactly like anything else on the street either. Did you consider his recommendation for the architecture? Because it certainly was more in line with what was in the neighborhood, but not a replicant of something in the neighborhood.
With all due respect from Lear, I've known him for 20 plus years. I just feel he got it wrong this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Badami.
It'll be quick. I know Commissioner Birch has some questions. As far as your opinion on the town architect, how do you feel about the staff? Because they're also giving you a denial, and they're not liking the massing either.
Boy, I wish when we presented this, I think you were at that CDAC, is that right?
Yes, I was.
Yeah. And I do have that same rendering, if we'd like to show it, and the evolution it's taken.
I have it as well, and if you read the comments from the CDAC, we had some concerns about how it might fit into the neighborhood, and we also did not know the square footages of each of the individual units.
Well, I think the floor plans were submitted.
Right, we didn't know the sizes, and
Yeah,
actually, when you
okay.
look at the renderings of the photos from what was shown to us, the original plan showed what appeared to be more open space, and also, I believe the entrance into the complex was on Forest and not Roberts.
Yeah, the entrance to the garage was on Forest. We met with the city staff and went over all the complexities of the project, and it was determined that we couldn't meet the code that way.
Okay. Just on a side note, real quick, we did like the idea of an elevator. I think we were hoping that we do have an unmet need in Los Gatos, and that's for an aging generation of residents, and I think you addressed that as well. But that being said, usually when you've got step-down seniors and you have an elevator, usually you don't have quite the massing of such large individual units in a multifamily building.
Thank you. Commissioner Birch.
I'm going to hold my question so that we can move on with public testimony.
Are there any other questions? I'm going to move on to the public portion of the hearing. I have a number of speaker cards. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, and when the yellow light comes on, don't be alarmed. That means you have 30 seconds. When the red light comes on, be alarmed. But the yellow light means you have a little bit more time. And speak right into the microphone, state your name and address. We have Mr. Art Bayon. Oui. Bon.
Commissioner Kane, may I ask a request of staff? Based on what I've seen in letters, I was just going to see if there was a map that the applicant had put up of the neighborhood. Could we pull that up for reference as speakers come up so we can see where they live in proximity to the property?
We will pull that up right now.
Thank you.
That'll work as long as the speaker doesn't want to use it. So when we're not using the speaker's photo, we'll put the
Obscure.
map back up.
You don't want to use it?
No, it's good. It's good.
Please use yours.
Yeah, okay. I'm just showing here,
Take the microphone with you, please. No, you have to take the microphone with you, or we
But-
can't.
I will speak from here probably.
It comes
Okay.
out.
Yeah, okay. No, it's okay. I will speak from here. So, okay, dear members of Planning Committee, my name is Art Vailonis. I'm living just next to the proposed building structure, 211 Oak Meadow Drive. And you just saw a new building structure proposed to be built in our neighborhood. The structure is indeed very modern, as you can see. The problem is it is gigantic, right? Of course, everything is relative, and the structure would definitely will be not so massive in a different neighborhood. But it has no place in a neighborhood consisting of individual houses, townhomes, and condos, which represent the small town character and the spirit of the Los Gatos town. The proposed structure is too massive for our neighborhood. Moreover, it does not fit within 2020 general plan of town of Los Gatos. And I would like to name it as it does not provide the well-planned, careful growth that reflects the town's existing character and infrastructure, does not preserve and enhance the existing character and sense of place in our residential neighborhood. The type, density, and intensity of new land use is not consistent with that of the immediate neighborhood. The proposed construction is not compatible and does not blend with the existing neighborhood, and it is not compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. The proposed structure is not designed to harmonize and blend within the scale and rhythm of the neighborhood and natural features in the area. Does not promote and protect the physical and other distinctive qualities of our neighborhood. With this in light, it is rather sad to hear a response from the developers to the consulting agents' architects' recommendations to the project. They say it's not required to respond to the existing content of the small-scale traditional neighborhood. According to the developers, the only project is required to follow the general plan and the housing elements requirements, period. This is what they say. And even more disturbing to hear that empathy for our, as neighbors' point of view, will only prevent the town from meeting its obligations to meet the housing element of the town's general plan. It's not, if not empathy from the town to our well-established neighborhood, what we should expect from the town? Is it indifference, apathy, coldness, disinterest? All these words are the antonyms of the word empathy. So we definitely expect from you the empathy. I can only say that the proposed structure definitely complies with the letter of the general plan. However, it miserably fails to comply with the spirit of the unique Los Gatos neighborhood. I'm convinced that we as Los Gatos residents should resist this massive building and preserve unique character of our neighborhood. Otherwise, in the very near future, such gigantic structure will turn against its own residents, as the spirit of our neighborhood will be diminished. The only reason the structure was proposed to be built in the first place. Thank you very much.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much, sir. Terry Dorian? Is it Durier? Durier.
Hello, I live at 311 Oak Meadow Drive, which is about halfway up the street that is behind the proposed development. As Mr. Viona said, it's massive. It's the only three-story building in the neighborhood. It's 12,000 square feet. It doesn't have, as you pointed out, it doesn't have the look and feel. It's not residential. And to clarify a point that was made in the earlier comments through the questioning is of the 4 units, 2 of them, based on the discussions that I've had with the owner of part of the property, or one of the lots that are being combined. The plan is that the owner is going to live in one of them and her brother is going to live in the other one. So there's only 2 units that could possibly appeal to anyone coming out of the mountains or elderly. 2 of them already sold by basically the developer's been sold to or occupied by the developer's family. I'll flag something that I know you've seen already, parking. It doesn't meet the town's parking requirements. It's going to have 9 parking spaces instead of 10. But more importantly, these are 3,000 square foot units on average. And a 3,000 square foot unit is probably going to have at least 2 cars, if not more. So there's a good chance that this will, even though the residents will spill out onto the street, let alone any room for parking. All I do is ask the Planning Commission to follow the staff's recommendation. I could read it here, but in the spirit of time, I won't, other than to point out that it does not, the reason they have rejected or denied it, it does not conform to the goals and policies that set forth in the general plan in terms of neighborhood compatibility. And the consulting architect did offer recommendations that the developer, owner, builder could follow to bring it in compliance. Thank you very much.
Questions for the speaker? Commissioner Janoff.
Regarding the last point you made, if the applicant incorporated the town architect's recommendations for reducing the height and making more compact residences, would that be acceptable?
If it also addresses privacy concerns that I haven't spoken to, but yes. If we can bring it in compatibility of the neighborhood, that's the key, compatibility of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Up. Commissioner Hudis.
I had a question about the parking. You
Yes.
raised the issue about the number of parking spaces. My understanding is that they're proposing, I believe, 11 spaces, 8 for the residents and 3 guest spaces.
Well, what I took, no, I'm
just
sorry.
looking at the plans that I have, which I believe is short 1 guest space of the 4 that it would be required, but is over the total, I think.
So you are more knowledgeable than I am. I just took it out of the staff report that said that the town requirement was 1.5 per unit, which is a total of 6, and 1 visitor parking for each of the units, which is another 4. So the the town requirements are a total of 10, yet they're only proposing 9. So the staff report that I read,
right.
if I read it
think there is
properly.
a discrepancy, but let me just ask about the guest parking, because that's where the discrepancy appears to be, that they are proposing 3 guest spaces, and I believe the code requires 4. Is there opportunity for guests to park on the street in that neighborhood easily?
Right now, the streets are full of cars most of the day. So that's the best I can do is respond is that parking is an issue already.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duryea. Mr. Miller, Park Miller, followed by Ruan Mac Rao? Reshma. Would you be ready to speak after Mr. Miller?
Yes, my name is Park Miller. I live at 327 Oak Meadow Drive. I'm the past president of our group of 10 homes that are all located along Oak Meadow Drive. I've also been an architect operating and practicing in this area for about 30 years. And I want to acknowledge that the developer was They have put these plans up and exposed to the community. They had a on-site display, and then they met with some of our homeowners to discuss the plans. So they have made an attempt there, but they were pretty blind to the input that we were able to give them. And certainly when the story poles went up, a lot of the neighborhood was quite concerned, especially Art and Reshma, whose backyards face this very tall wall of the proposed building. And if you look at the elevations, a good portion of those walls that face right to their yards have this cow wall material, which is a translucent type material. And right there, I think it was pointed out in your consultant's study that those could serve as kind of a lantern at night. If there was any lights on in the stairwells, there'd be a big, tall, luminescent panel that looked directly into these yards. Personally, I like the architecture. If it was scaled properly, I suggested to them in one of our meetings that they reduce the height of the buildings on the perimeter or on the side properties to 2-story and maybe conceal some of the additional space and some sloped roof elements that would appear more like a roof to a 2-story structure than a 3-story structure. They've essentially used all the available space that's available through the zoning ordinance, and so essentially the whole volume of the space is utilized in buildings up to the limit of the zoning ordinance. And this is way out of context for the small-scale nature of the neighborhood.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Alicia Barella? I'm going to ask her to speak next.
Sorry.
I'm just lining them
Yeah.
up.
Hi, my name is Reshma Rao. I live at 217 Oak Meadow Drive. If you look at the map here.
You need to take the mic with you, or no one will hear you, nor the record.
That's fine. Okay.
It comes out.
The second house up off of Oak Meadow is my house. I don't know if I can project this. I would just like to show the invasion of privacy into my backyard. As you can see, it's almost on top of me, the structure. Just if you look at where the poles are in comparison to my fence and my backyard. I agree with everything else everyone has said here. I just wanted to raise my own privacy concerns.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Alicia Barella, followed by Genaro Mesoro. Come on down.
My name is Alicia Barella, and I am at 1 Monroe Court. That is my mailing address. My legal address is 35 West Roberts Road. In other words, my property is catty-corner right from this proposed development. I think I had looked at the proposed drawings, and I was struck with the kind of prefab nature of them. It's just boxy and not very pleasing. This looks a little different. I think it's softer with the green. When the story poles went up, I drove down Roberts Road as they were going up, and when I came home, I was struck with the height. It is, 3 stories. We do have apartments, we do have condos, but none of them are that massive. And Roberts Road has become much busier after the bridge was repaired. and it's more popular than it used to be. But I feel like when you drive down with those story poles, I felt almost claustrophobic. It is really out of keeping with the neighborhood. Then I went into my house, and I was having a cup of tea at my kitchen, and I looked out my kitchen window, and I realized instead of looking out at trees when I look towards Roberts Road, I will now be looking at a building. So it is much more, it's much larger than I think it needs to be. I can't imagine if I were looking for a 3,000 square foot house that I would choose something that's so compacted with other people. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. The following speaker will be Paul Vieth. Please come down. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Hanaro Mezaroa, 218 Avery Lane, about 2 blocks over. I would like to thank our applicant for making this decision quite easy regarding compatibility when he admitted himself that he did not draw any inspiration from the surrounding neighborhood. However, I would like to go into some specific points. As far as aesthetic considerations, in my personal opinion, I think it's hideous. But he did not give any details as to the aesthetic design. He said it has right angles and that all buildings have right angles. This is true, but this building is extremely angular. It has a prominence of square features that recess and go outside of the main wall, and is not at all in line with the number of right angles that other buildings have. A second point is the removal of large trees that is planned, that I read in the staff report. This connects to the previous speaker that instead of seeing those large trees, they will be removed, and that, of course, is a detriment to the quality of the air and the environment in our town. Thirdly, the house that is white, the smaller lot that is next to it, that house was just recently built. And for it to be demolished to build another building is, to me, the height of absurdity. Fourthly, the old building, in line with my previous statements about preserving our history, should be considered. And I heard it was built in 1949, which is only a few years outside of the requirement for review. And I believe it deserves preservation. The open space, the old windmill, really provides a touch of nostalgia and aesthetic beauty for that area. Please deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Paul Vieth will be followed by Laura Vieth.
Thank you,
Will be followed by Ted Floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Vieth. I live at 307 Oak Meadow Drive. I'm four doors down, and I've lived in Los Gatos for 20 years. And I've been to several of these planning commission meetings, many of them over the years, and I've always respected the planning board's difficult decision between growth and progress and keeping the character of the neighborhood. But frankly, I'm very disappointed that there's something wrong in the process that allowed this project to get to this point, this proposed monstrosity to get to this point. Something's broken in the process. I mean, it is so obviously out of character with the neighborhood. It's not even close. So something is definitely wrong in the process here. I mean, let's just go to the facts, right? I mean, this piece of property has 2 residents on it today, and this is nothing more than a developer trying to squeeze as much onto this piece of property as possible. I mean, this is a 3-story office building disguised in residential clothing. I mean, I implore all of you just to drive by and look at the story poles. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious. It's not even close. So all this is going to do is the people's equity in this area is built on the privacy that they have in a neighborhood feel. All you're doing is, if this moves forward, is take hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity out of the pocket of any resident within a square block of this monstrosity and give it to a developer that's going to be gone tomorrow. I mean, this is going to dramatically impact. And anybody who's in a square block area of this sees the third story. To hear the comment that the third story is not visible it's laughable. I mean, I can't even believe someone would say that when you look at the story poles. I mean, it is so overwhelmingly tall relative to everything else in the neighborhood. Yes, there is a very old apartment complex across the street that is buried back in the trees that nobody really knows is even there. But if you look at it, the back of the property just looks down on all our properties. I mean, our values are based on the privacy and the oak trees and of single-family residences in the neighborhood. I mean, this is just going to destroy our property values if the height and mass of this thing is allowed. It's so out of character. I mean, I just implore you to drive by, and it's just so obvious. You'll see it right away.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Mr. Vieth, your wife will not be back?
No, she had
Okie doke. Ted Floor, followed by Kevin Fellini.
Hi, my name is Ted Floor. I'm at 49 West Roberts Road. I'm directly across from the project. I'm all for a proposed project going across the street there, but my main concern is the height of the project. All buildings on our street are in the 25 to 30 foot height range. This one is 35 feet. It's 5 feet taller than the tallest building, which is up on the corner of University and our street. There are 4 townhouses that were recently built over on Hubble Road, which is the next street next to us. They are approximately 25 feet high and well done. They match the neighborhood very nicely. Now, I could see something like that rather than this type of project. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Mr. Fellini, followed by Bruce Peterson.
Hello, my name is Kevin Fellini. I think I'll probably be run out on a rail after this, but nonetheless. I'm a resident at 55 Roberts Road. For almost 20 years, I was the president of that association, and it's diagonally across the street from the proposed development. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'd like to use this time to convey my complete support for this project. The proposed development maintains existing density while significantly upgrading the quality of the housing stock in the area. I'm 100% in favor of this proposal as described in the documents on the planning site. Among the objections you may hear regarding the proposal are the architectural style, the character of the neighborhood, and the height of the building. I do not share these objections. Currently, there is no clear architectural style or theme in the surrounding neighborhood. Within one block, the current mix includes a plumbing showroom, a dry cleaner, several automotive shops, a commercial bakery, a dentist office, an optometrist, apartment buildings, condominium complexes, and a small number of single-family homes. While eclectic, the current mix of real estate in this neighborhood does not convey the impression of conscious zoning efforts, but rather the opposite. The styles of the buildings described include Quonset huts, mid-century cinder block, modern shingle, mock Victorian, storybook cottage, Spanish colonial, and 70s modern, complete with wood siding. If there's a theme, then I have yet to discern what it might be. With this in mind, I suggest our focus should be on the construction of quality housing stock to pull the neighborhood forward. From what I've seen, the proposed development does just that. Regarding the character of the neighborhood, properties included in the proposal are currently occupied by a single-family home, which has been split into 3 units, as well as a second single-family home that has not been subdivided. The area is poorly lit at night, and there are no sidewalks. The first subdivided home has been visibly dilapidated for at least 20 years, and it's not unheard of, including tonight when I came here, to see automobiles parked on the lawn. Is this the charm we wish to preserve? This notion of charm is nothing more than whimsy and perhaps fantasy. The second home, while not exhibiting any outward signs of decay, is quite small and characterized by a rather odd combination of architectural styles. It has changed hands several times within the past decade, and as a result is not currently accretive to the stability of the neighborhood or the town. Today, these properties are underperforming on their own, detrimental to the health of the neighborhood, and long overdue for upgrades. The world, the valley, and even Los Gatos are changing. Our highways and surface streets are more congested, our population increases, and we live in an environment of increasing commercial and residential density. The change can be stressful, the challenges will continue. What we can do together is to focus on delivering the best outcomes for the future. When I saw the proposed development, I was excited. I still am. I think it's a great plan to pull our neighborhood forward, and I urge your approval.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Bruce Peterson, followed by Linda Peterson. Going once, going twice. Ann Lamborn, followed by Lee Quintana.
I'm Ann Lamborn from 7 Monroe Court, which also fronts onto Roberts Road just above the bridge. And I've owned that property since 1970. The house is from 1923. It doesn't matter what that house looks like or anything like that because it has no impact on this project whatsoever because you really can't see it. I suppose this project has some impact on me. When I walk to downtown Los Gatos to get a cup of coffee, and I'm walking through a whole bunch of cars and wondering whether I should walk in the chuck holes, potholes, or walk in the street, but I see from the plan that's corrected. My feeling about the architecture, well, I have led 2 appeals of developments in this neighborhood. One, the development across the creek up at Ohlone Court, and then the one at the end of Monroe Court. I have kind of a different viewpoint, though, on change in my neighborhoods. Since actually when I came there, it was really terrible with a gravel road and so forth like that. As far as the architecture goes, obviously it's massive and blocky, but I've seen houses of this style in Old Palo Alto, and it's kind of interesting how they merge in, and I'm sure a site and architecture plan went through them. I think this architect can go back to the drawing board, and I think he can incorporate every single idea that has been presented here, and I think he can come up with a beautiful product that will meet the needs of this neighborhood and the needs of Los Gatos. I think the idea of elevators is a really great idea. It's such an ideal place to live with, I mean, here today I am now a senior citizen, and I just love living in this neighborhood. The amenities are extraordinary, and I hated the construction of the bridge every single bit, but it's really great to have excellent access to the Los Gatos Creek Trail. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Lee Quintana, followed by Ann Lamborn, or did I call her name already? Hey, you are Lamb, sorry. I thought we just had a new card come up. Ms. Quintana.
Good evening. Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I have really mixed feelings about this project. I'm not opposed to the type of design, but I do think the building is out of scale for the neighborhood. I'm curious about one thing that I just noticed as I was looking at the plans. I believe that because it's 4 units, it needs to be ADA accessible. What I wasn't sure about is, do all of the units need to be ADA accessible or just a minimum of 1? The reason I ask that is because if all units did not have elevators, there might be an opportunity for more parking in the in the below grade garage. In addition, looking at the plans, it seems like there is some opportunity to work with them and make the building smaller. There's many feet in each unit that is a full 2-story. The outside balconies are sometimes quite large, and they're covered, which adds to the mass, the apparent mass of the building. So I wouldn't throw out the architecture completely. It seems like we talk about Los Gatos having developed over time, and that's why we have a series of different kinds of styles. And if we just stop allowing any kind of evolution of style, we're going to be living totally in the past forever. But those are just opinions. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker?
I have one more comment. When I think of the sites we have in town that are zoned for multifamily or higher density, I think they're zoned that way because it's intended that they're be smaller in size so that the units that are there fit the neighborhood better. In fact, on this designation in the general plan, it says multifamily, duplex, or small single family. And we talk about this as being single family attached, so I would think that small applies to that too.
Thank you. Grant Barnes.
Hello, my name is Grant Barnes. I own a house at on Monroe Court, just across the street, basically. And I'm coming into this process very late, but I have looked at it somewhat. And my thoughts, it's quite interesting to hear my neighbors' comments. And I do respect them. I think they're making some good points, but I share one of the previous comments that I think it's important to not have every single house in the town look like a craftsman-style house, or have, if we look at the condos and apartment buildings that are around, they're pretty devoid of any real character. And this particular building, while it's architecturally forward, I guess you could say, it is unique and different from anything else that's in the town. And I think that's maybe a good reason to go ahead and build it. Many of the surrounding communities that are affluent, that are vibrant and diverse, both types of people that live there and different jobs that they have, they also have diverse styles of architecture and housing. And I really, I think it's important to allow that creativity in a town. And some of the comments of my other neighbors saying that maybe it's too big, it doesn't seem that way to me. However, perhaps if you live right next door, that would be a different perspective. But I guess in general, I'd just like to say that I'm really impressed with the design and the green aspect to it, the rain harvesting, the solar, and that would be something that the town, I believe, should embrace and have as a showcase for other future buildings to follow, to set a standard to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. I do not have any other speaker cards. If there's any forthcoming, I would do that now. Seeing none, I'm going to invite the applicant to come back up for an additional 5 minutes for a question, comment, rebuttal.
Okay. I've a little bit of wounds, but I heard some positives. So, where do I begin? I'll just start talking. I created this illustration to illustrate the third story relative to the site, which doesn't show up very well here in color. It's kind of washed out, but you can see the outside perimeter and then the lower floor. But I'll just kind of give you the numbers. Roughly, the third story is 40% of the less than the story below. So it's not quite half, but it's significantly smaller and recessed back from the street. This was intended, again, to diminish and mitigate the third story. When you go out, you do see the story poles representing the third story, but we're trying to be creative in the architecture to mitigate that, and that's what that rendering was showing. Comments were made like, this is the only three-story. I could have sworn I showed three other buildings, and there's even more than that are really on the street and around the neighborhood. The parking thing is, I think, if we get to that point of approving it, we'll get down to that one space that we ended up putting inside of the owner's units rather than as guest parking, because we are one over the grand total. I wanted to show this. This is the green wall that we're putting on for the neighbor that was concerned, because we did have at least 3 meetings with the neighbors. Not all of them showed up all the time, but we had an open forum followed by 2 offers for neighbors that live closest by and are most impacted. So we did listen to the neighbors. We're not trying to come in here, as mean old developers at all. I really think that this is an amazing project. So the corner that had the cowl wall, which is a green feature because it adds daylighting inside the units. We don't have to turn on the lights anymore. We put on a green screen on there so that you grow an ivy or something like that, and vines, and then those vines, you look out your backyard and you're seeing something that sort of emulates a tree or a green space. Now, the other thing that we did for the neighbors, and we got a lot of buy-in, and I don't think we really heard anything tonight about privacy concerns, because we worked with the neighbors and made many adjustments to the plans to provide privacy between both the neighbors and to our projects. So on the third story, the windows at the third story are in the master bathroom. They've been raised up, sill height that's about eye height, and then we placed bathtubs and things like that in front of it so that when you're in the bathtub, of course, you're not looking out the window and you're not walking over to the window to see out. And then the windows are also, an obscured glass. Something that we just made recently that you don't have in your plans is we reduced at the ground level, at the top is what you have in your plans now. You'll see that large window with doors and a balcony that comes out. We eliminated that balcony, squished the width down about by a third, and then raised the window off the ground, so that we're not projecting private spaces out towards the neighbor. So I just wanted to say that I'm sorry I slipped up, maybe get a little nervous, and my lips say something that my mind didn't know I was supposed to say. We absolutely know that this neighborhood, what it's made of, and it is quite eclectic. It is not just cottages, but we came in, talked to staff very early on, and I said, do I have to emulate these cottages, or we have the full range of massive apartment buildings, 3 stories high, all the way down to cottages. My time's up, so.
Thank you very much. The other gentleman that was here, Mr. Glenn, I have a question for him. And the other commissioners may have a question for you. Mr. Glenn, is it the intent and/or commitment of your group to, in fact, achieve a LEED's Platinum certification on whatever building goes in this spot?
Yes, that's the intent. You can't, you can design for that, but you actually have to get tested and certified.
Right.
So we can't promise that we would get there, but we've had 24
But it's your intent and
homes.
commitment to try.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions for either of the speakers? Commissioner Birch.
Actually, Mr. Glenn, I'd like to ask you a few questions, please. So I understand the nature of your business and that these units are prefabbed. So if you don't mind, I just have a couple questions about that particular. Okay. Do all 3 floors come prefabbed, or do you prefab each individual floor?
We prefab modules that represent parts of the building, so they don't come in 2-story sections.
Right.
They
Okay.
come in general, 12 to 14 feet and 30 feet long.
So if, as this discussion moved forward, there were some custom style modifications that were requested, do your fab plant, or however, do you have the capabilities of customizing, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so the modules aren't, it's not McDonald's. They're not pre-made, and they're made per spec. And modules, by the way, don't have to just be rectangles. They can go in and out. They can have undulation.
Okay, great. Keeping with a couple questions with you, when they do come, is it my understanding that those are set in place with a crane?
Correct.
Okay. So I assume then you'd have to go through all the proper steps, because
You
I
bet.
know that you are reducing some construction considerations in the neighborhood, but a crane is quite impactive.
Yeah, and let me be clear. Installation is a disruptive day for neighbors, absolutely. And we warn people about it a week in advance. But again, we are saving many months of much greater disruption.
Okay, thank you. I have more questions for the architect later.
Let me add one thing specifically. I think this would be the first LEED Platinum residence in this area. We don't know for sure because there may be something underway, but so.
And you are going to actually file the paperwork for that. It's not we're designing towards it. It's you're going to file.
Oh,
for
yeah,
it.
no, when it gets started, we file with the USGBC. This is our intent, absolutely.
Commissioner Janoff.
Just another question about the modules. You've talked about the walls, dimensions, linear. What's the height of each story in this particular design?
Variable for the module.
Let's not
Sorry,
talk about
excuse
me. Let's not talk about the double high, but a standard height. What is that in these designs?
Standard height for modules are 12 to 13 feet. We haven't modularized this, so I can't tell you exactly what that do.
But generally
12
speaking,
to 13 feet. yeah.
12 to 13
Yeah.
foot interior height walls.
That's measured exterior, bottom of floor to top.
Okay, what would the interior height be of a 12-foot exterior dimension?
It depends whether it's steel or wood. So
in
it
this
could,
particular case?
whatever it needs to be.
What's the interior
Please
height?
come up to the mic.
Yeah, he has to answer.
Yeah, what's the interior height of your single
I
height?
believe we do have some taller spaces that are, you might say, double height. We're averaging 9 feet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Hanson.
I had
Gentlemen.
a question for you, and
Why don't we both stay near the mic, just in case?
yeah. So you might have mentioned this earlier in your original presentation, but since you're from Santa Monica, I wanted to get an idea. Since this is a relatively new architectural style to us, do you have any other deployments in Santa Clara County at this time?
So Los Altos is, I apologize, I don't know if that's Santa Clara.
Yes.
It is.
Okay, yeah, we have a 3-unit. I don't use contemporary. I still use modern. It's a Ray Cappy, who actually was his mentor in architecture school. 3-unit, first LEED Platinum multifamily in Silicon Valley. So you could see that.
All right. So there is one in Los Altos somewhere.
Correct.
So.
And I apologize again. Is Menlo Park Santa Clara?
No, but it's
Okay.
the next county over.
We,
so.
we have a prefabricated office building, Ray Cappy, modern, that we did in Menlo Park.
Okay. And I had a question for the architect. I don't know what the other commissioners are going to come out on this, but supposing that it, if this was a modified proposal, there was some scenario that the commission, thought would be a better scenario. Are you willing to consider any of the consulting architects' recommendations or the recommendations that we've heard tonight in terms of maybe looking at a different size? Are you willing to be flexible at all, or does it have to be exactly the way it is?
No, we can be flexible, absolutely. I realize, we're always flexible. We're trying to, this thing has been evolving. The whole process is evolution. We tried very hard to get a one-on-one with Larry to sort of really understand, where he was coming from.
You mean Larry Cannon, the town architect?
Yeah, Larry Cannon.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I'll just keep it simple.
It might not just be Larry Cannon's recommendations, but it also might be the size of the individual units. I mean, I don't know what the modifications might be, but I just wanted to get an understanding because, we certainly want to be able to work with you to come to a solution. So,
yeah, he made comments like, we didn't do, the garage doors are uninteresting, and I just didn't understand anything that he was trying to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Hudis.
Thank you. I wanted to go a little deeper into the idea that Commissioner Hansen raised about potential incorporation of some of the ideas from the consulting architect. And I am not suggesting that you try to design a faux Victorian cottage type of a building here. There were some sort of conceptual elements of it, and I want to understand whether you're open to those elements, because staff has raised, I think, actually quite articulately in their report, the issue of massing and what massing means, and I think one of the things that leads to that is that this looks like a single building rather than individual residences. Is that something that you would be open to, specifically expressing the homes as individual units as compared to a single building where you don't get the sense of individual units?
Believe it or not, we did try to do that. When the garage opening kind of necessitated splitting the building into a right and a left side from Roberts Road, we'll say, a portion of that, having all all 4 units equivalent it was difficult. And you can see that in the floor plan, because the driveway requirements are quite wide and as wide as an entire unit. So, but we do have, with the landscape, they all have individual walkways, they all have their individual front porches. rather than, getting kind of, I think we could probably work on it and try to maybe move the stairs into different locations and modify the massing a little more. Try it.
Okay. Along those lines, there was a suggestion about two-story as one of the alternatives. That is to work more within the height of a two-story structure. Is that something that you think you might be interested in working toward?
This was the primary reason I wanted to talk to Larry about, because as the the rendering from Roberts Road indicates, if you can't see the story from the street, and we didn't even have in the rendering the trees, because that would sort of defeat the purpose of looking at the building itself. But that, I suppose we can look at anything, but that was what I had to say about Larry's comment. I don't think that's why I disagree with him. I want him to now come to me and tell me why this doesn't look like a two-story structure.
Okay.
I think the question has been asked and answered, and again, give me a break. I think you need to understand that Larry Cannon is a consulting architect for the town, and the decisions will be made at this level by this commission. Commissioner Hudis, did you have another question? Does anyone else have another question? Commissioner Birch.
I don't know who has the controller, but I was wondering if you could just go to the front elevation. There you go. So one of the things that struck me in listening to this conversation about the appearance of size, the third story, I appreciate that you did set it back. I'm not going to get into the 3 versus 2, was the very dominant overhang that you have going over. I think that might be a balcony in front. So when you're saying, how does it appear to be 3 stories, I believe it's that very dominant overhanging that's creating that massing. And now that I understand from Mr. Glenn that while these are prefabricated modules, they can be customized, I'd like to know if that particular architectural aspect is something that you may be able to look at reducing and pulling back. It's clearly, even from the picture you have there, blocking a portion of the tree. It's creating some visual blockage. Is that something that perhaps you could look at as you are looking at some of these suggestions we're discussing? You can just take the microphone with you. No, you actually have to take the microphone with you. Thank you.
So I think what you're talking about is this overhang up here and
correct.
And the yeah, absolutely. That I acknowledge that, and we if we pull that back, that's your little hint that there is a third story up there. I agree.
It really is. It's more than a hint. I think it's a strong suggestion. But so that's one thing that I would like. Also, when we were on the privacy mitigation sheet, I'd like to understand. I love growth walls, green walls. They're great, but they do take a while to grow. So behind those, from the notes here, it's an opaque panel. I want to understand on the inside. So it's 8 o'clock at night, and I've turned my lights on in my kitchen. Is there light then emitting outside through this, what is essentially 2 stories of an opaque wall, or is there something creating a barrier on the inside?
Well, it's really not opaque. Light it's translucent, and light will come out of it. But will it beam like a window? Absolutely not. I've been using cowl wall for.
No, I know what it is.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm wondering if on that back corner, since it does overlook other residences, the growth wall, are you using more of a fine mesh for the ivy to grow up? What kind of?
Well, it's an actual product. It's a double mesh. There's
What?
two. it's like a sandwich, if you will, or they're about an inch apart. And then it's made to so that it can kind of grow in between and really become something very strong. It's not just like a wire woven mesh fencing or something.
Okay.
It's
May I ask
it's an
one
actual
question about
green wall
privacy on the
product.
backside? So then my last question is, if we were looking at the rear exterior, a couple of your neighbors had some, because I do understand that, and I feel better understanding that on that corner, we're not going to have some bright light overlooking everyone. And from this view, I feel more comfortable with the window line along the back. I just want to understand, not on the top floor. I actually was looking at the windows and the balconies and wanting to ensure that with the articulation that you've given here, that the neighbors are not going to have somebody standing on a balcony looking straight in at them. Have you been able to take this and talk to those back neighbors to ensure their privacy?
We invited the same group. Unfortunately, a couple days ago, only one person came.
Okay.
And but our intent was this was specific because I think the picture. I'm not sure if she's here anymore. The lady that lived this is her view, and this was done specifically for her.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to close the public portion of the public hearing and see if the commissioners have any questions of staff, wish to comment on the application, or introduce a motion for consideration by commission. Having said that, I have a question for staff, if I may. There was a comment made on the process, and it was presumed that the application was very inappropriate. And the question was, how could you ever allow it to get this far? And I was thinking the rights of people are in question. They could propose a Happy Hollow Zoo there. It might not be successful, but it's their right to propose that. Was there any failing of the system in this application?
No. So it is zoned for multifamily. The proposal is a multifamily dwelling, which is a permitted use in that zone. It meets all the density requirements within that zone. No.
So the application has to come forward. Staff doesn't have the ability to say, sorry, even if it was, as the person had stated, was outrageous. It's still the staff doesn't have the ability to deny an application that comes forward and meets the criteria.
Nor does CDAC.
Yeah, it has to come forward to the Planning Commission.
Questions? Discussion? Commissioner Birch.
For the attorney, could you remind us, I know recently we've had some changes in the residential solar policy, and this applicant is suggesting a flat roof in order to utilize solar panels. As we were having some of the discussion with staff, and I heard a couple of my fellow commissioners talk a bit maybe about some roof articulation. Where does the ability to maybe make modifications to an architectural application marry up with the solar policy?
You're testing my memory. We made those changes by state code and state requirements, and I believe they primarily rested not with new development, but with existing development and permitting streamlining to approve those projects that were allowed for solar. In other words, for historical homes now, we can't not deny them based on the historical structure. I don't believe it really applied to new development, but Joel might remember also more than I do.
Well, I think Rob's correct. So the commission doesn't have any limitations if they request modifications to roof form that modify the proposed solar, then those modifications will be made as part of the new structure.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion or a motion? Commissioner Janoff.
This is a question, I think, for the architect. Solar panels in Los Gatos are sometimes challenged because you don't have sufficient solar exposure. And this neighborhood is quite wooded. You're proposing to take down a number of trees and you've got 35.
Commissioner, with all due respect, I've closed the public hearing.
Oh, I can't ask a question?
No, we're going to ask
I'm
each
sorry.
other questions or staff, or if it's clearly essential, I can reopen.
My question goes to the issue of reducing it from a 3-story to a 2-story, whether there will be sufficient solar exposure in order to have solar power.
Can we find out?
We don't have that information. That can be, depending on the outcome of this evening's meeting, that could be a request that moves forward, regardless of the outcome of this evening's meeting.
Commissioner Hudis.
So with regard to neighborhood compatibility, I am reading the section of the staff report that talks about contextual architecture on page 5. And I think that this has been particularly well written and will serve us well in terms of looking at other applications, in that it does acknowledge that that change occurs, and that that in certain cases it's not defined by a particular style, but responds to the programmatic needs of the of the user in the neighborhood. And but the issue of massing is raised here, and I want to just ask the question. Mr. Cannon suggested 2 alternatives, and I wonder if those alternatives would address your concerns about massing. And those, alternatives have to do with the issue of the 3-story multifamily being larger than the buildings in the neighborhood, because the 3rd story is not integrated into distinct and setback roof forms, and that the 4 homes are not expressed as individual units. So if this project addressed some of those ideas about the 3rd story and expressing the homes as individual units, would that address the massing issue related to neighborhood compatibility?
Well, I'd say without seeing revised drawings illustrating some or portions of any or all of those recommendations, I couldn't tell you, because there are many ways to address those issues. What I would say is those are recommendations to try to attempt to make the buildings, even though they may still be taller and larger, the building more compatible with the neighborhood from a mass and scale perspective. So they definitely would be an improvement if they would get all the way to where staff would then be comfortable in the neighborhood and the context of the existing neighborhood. I wouldn't know until we completed our evaluation.
And if I could, in terms of seeing drawings, you're not really talking about small modifications to the drawings that we've seen here, correct? You're talking about really seeing drawings that address these issues more fundamentally?
Correct. We have not seen those.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Hanson.
It's questions and comments, right?
Yes.
Okay, so after listening to everything that was said tonight, I think I concur with the fact that the building is out of scale with the neighborhood. Now, it does appear that there might be more than one way to address it. One might be to follow the consulting architect's recommendations and articulate the building better in a better way, and make the individual units look more distinct. But I do think that that the units may well be too big for the neighborhood, considering that it's a multi-story. And I think Mr. Cannon said that in his recommendation. Similar projects that he'd seen were kind of more in the range of 1,800 to 2,100 square feet. So for me, I think it has to come out smaller, probably in terms of unit size, possibly in terms of 2 stories, unless there's some way that the architecture can be changed to make the 3 stories seem much more like a 2-story than it currently does. And without seeing revised plans, I don't know how we would, get to that. So, and then as far as the general architecture, I love the idea of having a LEED Platinum building. I think, that Los Gatos has a sustainability plan, and I think we ought to consider more proposals like that and encourage more building like that. So if the cost of that is having to look at a different architectural style, then I'm reasonably okay with that as long as the massing was more appropriate and the size of the units for the neighborhood.
Commissioner Birch.
So following along with Commissioner Hanson, I know that there's some issues with the massing and the height, but I really like this. And let me tell you why. One, liking personally to keep up with architectural styles and modifications to how construction is being done. I'm very excited to see the use of modular units because they really do lessen the impact of construction on everybody. You do not have to listen to somebody hammering from 7 a.m. till 8 o'clock at night. They're very economic. They work very well. I also am really excited at the solar, the retained water. I think it's something new and something that as a town, as we are moving forward, that we need to be looking at for all of our new developments and trying to be more sustainable. I do think that there's a way to bring the massing down. I think that the large overhangs draw more attention to the third story, actually, because there's a large shadowing factor with that. That kind of contradicts the other color schemes on the building. And I agree with Commissioner Hudas that I believe if there was a bit more articulation in the front to show that it's actually 4 units, the massing would actually appear smaller because it would be 4 individual rather than 1 large. It's just an architectural trick of the eye, but I do think that it would address a lot of those needs. So I would think, seeing those, I think that there are a lot of very positive qualities, and I'm not opposed even to the size of the units. I think there are a lot of people with families that travel that don't want to deal with yards and maintenance, and this may appeal to those type of families and give them an option. So with some minor modifications, I would be very comfortable with it.
Other comments? Commissioner Badami.
I concur with Commissioner Birch. She brought up a lot of great points and a lot of the positive things that we did see in CDAC. Where I would see a little bit of difference would be that I would like to see the units be smaller because that's what I see with multifamily zoning, is that we expect the units to be smaller in size to bring it perhaps a better scale in working on the massing with that particular zoning.
Other comments or questions? I have a comment. The design of the building is enticing. Like everybody, like most people, I love Frank Lloyd Wright, but he might not cut it on Tate Avenue. It's a beautiful building, and the sustainability and the LEED certifications are very tempting, but it seems to fly in the face of points in the general plan that one of the speakers brought up, that is also in our staff report. Preserve, enhance existing character, sense of place in residential neighborhoods. It doesn't. Oh, it's a marvelous building, but it's having trouble complying with our language. So, whereas I would praise the architecture and the engineering and the design to go in it, I'd say fit it into the neighborhood. Now, there may be economies of scale that may not work with that because sustainability is not cheap, but that's what it needs. And we've said before to other projects, rather than design from the dais, there are 3 things to consider. 1, compliance with our language when it's very, very clear. And this isn't even residential design guidelines. This is general plan, which supersedes the general design guidelines. I'd like to not lose any of these points. Number 1, comply with the language. Number 2, listen to staff. I got the feeling that may not have been achieved in this project. Staff's recommendation was 1 word, denial. You don't see that every day. And the third consideration is listen to your neighbors. I could do it, but I have a hard time putting in Frank Lloyd Wright if it drove everybody in the neighborhood crazy. They've been there 10, 20 years. We've got to find a compromise. And a beautiful, architectural, lovely building may not be that compromise. So I have no concerns with the building. I have concerns with where they want to build it. and with what the language says about that, what staff says about that, what the neighbors say about that. Other questions or comments? Commissioner, you can't do that. Can't, thank you, no. Commissioner Badami.
The commissioners have some different opinions here. So at this point, we may have an impasse. So we typically give an applicant an opportunity to have another hearing and continue it to see if they could work on some of the issues that have been addressed by the commissioners. So I am going to attempt a motion that we move to continue this to a date certain, with the direction that the applicant work on the massing, which seems to be a primary concern of the town architect and staff and several commissioners, reduce the overhangs, better articulation in the front, consider the scale of multifamily zoning with smaller units. And perhaps other commissioners would like to add to my motion, but that's my motion so far.
Well, the guidance I would add is what I said, the language, the people, the staff, and that may be to suggest, try to find a way to make it work with 2 stories. So the massing and the overhang and the privacy and all those other issues, including our language, is addressed.
Well, I get that, but I think at this point we might be looking for a second, and then we could get some discussion.
I'm sorry, I second the motion. Discussion. Commissioner Janov.
In spite of what might have been heard, we did hear issues of privacy concern among the neighbors, and so I would only add that a revised design would take into consideration quite specifically the neighbors who are in direct, whose property lines abut the property for the applicant, and make sure that those privacy concerns are eliminated as much as possible. Yeah, of course, and make sure that the neighbors meet with you, even if you have to do one-on-ones, to make sure that their individual concerns are met, because each of them is looking at a little bit different view of your multifamily structure.
Thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Hudas.
So I'm not sure I got all of the points in your motion, but I wanted to ask a question about it, and that is, to me, the primary issue with the massing is that this looks like one building and not a residence, and that then leads to issues with neighborhood compatibility. I think there are wonderful modern or contemporary residential architecture, and I'm not seeing that. So the point that I wanted to emphasize is that the 4 homes be expressed as distinctly individual units, and I think that would add some further direction to what could be a difficult redesign.
Just an injection. When I heard you say that, it doesn't have to be 4. It could be 2. It could be 1. It could be 3. But to be compatible with that space in the neighborhood, we're not insisting that it be 4. Is that correct?
Well, I hadn't heard in the motion a change in the number of units. Is that correct?
That is correct. What I did state was that there be better articulation in the front, and so that would be more defined front entries. But I am fine with the 4 units. And also, I'd like to add, Commissioner Hudas, you stated it very well. I would like to have stated it the way that you did.
That's acceptable to the seconder. Other discussion. Commissioner Birch.
I just have a question of staff, really quick. Obviously, we're making this motion based on an assumption that the applicant would want to continue. When we reopen to ask them about a date certain, do they have the opportunity to say if they actually do or don't want to take this advice and continue?
Well, I would say that question was asked previously in the hearing, and it seemed that they were definitely willing to look at considering modifications, so I think that they would be open to that, but we probably should open the hearing up for the distinct question of how long they think that's going to take so that we can get appropriate date certain should this motion pass.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
I just wanted to add another comment, or a couple of comments. Relative to Commissioner Kane's comments, I am a big believer, of course, in the general plan, and so I'm not thinking of just really minor modifications. I think that in order, although I'd be willing to look at a proposal that had 4 individual unit articulation, I'm not imagining a scenario where this, without actually being much smaller, in reducing the size of the units, it's going to be in scale with the neighborhood. So, I just want to emphasize that that's a really important part of Commissioner Badami's motion that I support, is the idea of looking at smaller size.
I'm thinking of Commissioner Erickson, and it was about this point in the proceeding he would say, do you understand what the motion is? I mean, there's been a lot of good ideas, but how does staff present this later on? Do you incorporate everything we've said? Everything's recorded, both audio and video. So the motion is a living, comprehensive. Correct. Thank you. Other Commissioner Hudis.
I maybe wanted to add one other thing for consideration, and that is the parking. I believe that there's a proposal for 11 spaces, and of which 3 are guest spaces, and I would encourage, if the maker of the motion would entertain this, and that is to encourage the applicant to look at a way of accommodating 4 guest spaces as per town code.
I would add that to the motion. If we have a second.
The seconder agrees. I'm just not fixated on 4 units. 3 units is no parking problem. I just want to be successful. Other discussion?
I would just like to say if the units are smaller, then 4 units works.
I do not disagree. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. On this kind of an motion, Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights?
There are not appeal rights, but we do need to get a date certain.
Shall I reopen the public hearing? I'm going to reopen the public hearing and call the applicant back up. You had said you were amendable to some guidance, and we're attempting to provide that. If you find what we're doing acceptable, can you give us a reasonable date, up to you and your staff, where we could continue this hearing?
What I'm hearing is a complete rethinking of the project. So I don't think it's appropriate, if we're going to rethink it, go through the process of involving the neighbors and getting their buy-off and redesigning back and forth. We're going to be able to do that at least in 2 months. I think it's going to be much longer than that.
I'm not concerned with the time. You take all the time you want to get it right.
Okay. What was the question then?
So given the comments, then I would suggest, if it's going to take a little more than 2 months, we can always continue it to date certain. If the process isn't completed with the modifications, then we'll just bring forward a cover memo requesting an additional continuance. So at this point, I would probably say looking at the May 24th meeting as the continuation date, and then if we're not ready by then, we will bring forward a memo to continue it to a further date.
I know you know this, but I don't. Is there a requirement that we do something by a certain date once the die is cast? Not in this case.
It's not, because there's going to be modifications, so the application can't be complete.
All right, the date again was May
24th.
Is that acceptable? All right. Then we have our motion, we have our second, we have our date certain.
We just need a motion for the date certain, or we can add that depending on how the town attorney wants us to handle that.
Let's have another motion for the date certain will be May 24th.
Well, I'll make a motion that the date certain for this application would be May 24th.
Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. All right. And again, this is not a situation where there would be any appeal rights. Is that
That's correct?
Then we move on to our final item, which is a report from the Community Development Director, Mr. Paulson. Do you have any news for us?
Just briefly, last night the town council met until the wee hours of this morning, and pertinent to Planning Commission, they adopted a policy regarding ancillary office use in the LM zone and parking associated with that. We've been getting a lot of requests of businesses that have multiple components. And for instance, I think one of the examples was someone who may stage and store warehouse furniture, also does some interior design, but also has retail there. And so the town allows ancillary office use, but there was no threshold there. So the threshold was made, which is up to 50% can be office, but then they have to park for the individual uses. So that was a policy that was adopted last night. Additionally, they began consideration of the 15215 Shannon Road plan development, which was the 5-lot subdivision in the hillsides. They got through public testimony and then ran out of time, and so they continued that to April 4th. And so the deliberations will continue on April 4th, and we will assume a decision will be made then.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. There being no other business, this meeting is adjourned.